Greetings and welcome back to The Outward Expression. I'm your host, Roman, and today I'm here with Linda Kloss, and we are at the beautiful Bishop's Hill Winery in lovely Joliet, Illinois. Linda and I have known each other for a couple of years, at least a few years, and I've come to know Linda fairly well, and I'm really impressed with her grasp of food and wine, so that's why we're here today. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Linda. Why don't you go ahead and just start by telling the folks, if there's anybody out there watching, a little bit about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. So again, my name is Linda Kloss. I do live here in Joliet, Illinois. I was an elementary music teacher for almost 30 years and had my own catering company on the side as well. I have always had a passion for food and wine pairing. And about 2 years before my retirement would have been full circle, I decided to leave education and go into wine. I often tease people and joke about the fact that I was an elementary music teacher and drank a lot of wine. And therefore, I've come now to this is where I hang my hat here at Bishop's Hill Winery. I trained formally with the Napa Valley Wine Academy out in Napa Valley. I would often, even though I was still teaching on my planned periods, I would go into my storage closet and study my little flashcards and whatnot, and decided one day just to enroll at the, drop of a hat kind of decision, and landed in Napa Valley Wine Academy, where the last 2 years of my teaching career, I would be studying for my exams and then have to fly out to California to take those exams. And then I'd be back in the classroom 2 days later, like nothing ever happened. And I became a certified sommelier after 2 years, and then an additional 2 years more, I became an advanced sommelier.
That's very interesting. Now, I want to go back to a point you made earlier, just a moment ago. That's really rolling the dice. You went from a 30-year career in what is conceivably a very stable position, and you roll the dice.
Yes.
And do you ever look back at all? What are your thoughts on that?
I really am glad that you asked that question. My father, this kind of goes back to my father, all right? He retired early and then passed away 4 months after he turned 53 without fulfilling all of the dreams that he wanted to do. And so I felt it was very important that if you feel something in your heart, and your gut and your heart are telling you to go in a different direction, that you need to take the risk.
That's interesting.
And so I'm kind of trying to give my father the legacy of, life is too short and you need to do what you need to do. It was very scary because like I said, I took a big hit by not doing my full retirement. And, even the school superintendent in my exit interview said, do you realize how many thousands of dollars you are losing because you're not waiting the full 30 years? And I said, absolutely, and I'm ready.
That's pretty brave. I gotta say, I really
never regretted it.
I remember you telling me that story, but it's right now I'm trying to really processing that and getting an idea of the kind of risk you took there, and I have to commend you for that. That is brave, very brave. And that's why we're here, because Linda's very interesting, and I'm looking for her to share a little bit more about her story today. So did you want to flesh out a little bit more about your education and how you ended up here in Bishop's Hill? Or
Sure. So when I was still teaching and studying to become a sommelier, I landed a job at Sullivan's Steakhouse in Naperville as their sommelier, and literally it was June 1st of 2018. That was my last day of my teaching career, and on June 2nd, I hit the floor at Sullivan's Steakhouse as their sommelier, and really never looked back. I was there for 2.5 years before corporate decided to eliminate that position in all of their restaurants across the U.S. Unfortunately, it's sad for the people that come in for that special experience of somebody coming to your table and talking about what you're going to order and how, what can I recommend to pair with that, and building connections with the guests in the restaurant. But, things happen. After that, I went to Wine 64 in Naperville, which is literally across the street from Sullivan's, and was one of what they call a wine lead. And so still working in wine. I then became a wine consultant for Vinnie's. And then when this place opened up, here I landed. And there's a very funny story behind that.
Tell it. So I'm curious.
A very funny story behind that. I had heard rumors. This is prior to COVID. I had heard rumors, like stirrings in Joliet, that there was going to be a winery open.
Oh, okay.
And it was just kind of like this low buzz that I would hear once in a while at Al's Steakhouse, which my husband and I frequent. So one night we're there and we're sitting at the bar, and I, of course, am talking, which I always am. I go to take a sip of my wine and it went down the wrong way, and I started coughing horribly. And this lady next to me, pats me on the back and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "This isn't the first time this happened. I used to be a wine judge for the state of Illinois, for the Illinois Grape Growers Vintners Association, and all the news stations were there recording the competition when, again, I swallowed wrong, and here in the silent judging, all of a sudden I spit my wine out across the panel on another judge."
Oh, my.
And I was mortified. So I'm telling her this story. She said, "Oh, I have a very good friend that's opening a winery in Joliet." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yes." And she said, "Damon Zunich, who is the winemaker here at Bishop's Hill." And she said, "I can give you his number." Well, I'm no scaredy cat. I text this guy that I've never met in my life, and I said, "You don't know who I am, but you will soon." And somehow I got it arranged to meet all of the owners, and then COVID hit. Didn't hear from them for a year. One day I'm sitting in my living room and I thought, I wonder if they're ever gonna call. And 5 minutes later I get a call from Phil Soto, one of the other owners and general manager, who said, "Are you still interested in coming on board?" And I said, "Absolutely. I'm going into work today. I'll give my 2 weeks notice." I was here the first week that they opened, and on day 2 of my employment, they made me manager.
Wow. So that is a fantastic story. And I'm really glad I asked that question because
All because I was choking on wine.
that's what you call a divine appointment.
Mhm.
So that actually worked out really well for you. So yeah, that's excellent. And tell me one of the other things about the reason again we're here today is because Linda has a real knack for pairing food and wine. So on that subject, I'm going to go through my little list of questions here. And let's see. You've told us about your education. So who would you most like to prepare for a dinner for, living or deceased? What would you prepare? Go into detail about the courses, the wine pairings, dessert, etc. How's that for us?
Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart,
Oh,
my
wow,
favorite composer of all time. If I could go back in time, that's who I would want to meet. He often, even though couldn't afford it most of the times, would have lavish parties. And so you would have, this huge spread of, maybe a roasted pig or a rack of lamb. So with me, I'm not a meat eater, but I know how to cook it. So I would probably make something like that crown roast, with the little white chef's hats, I call them, on the legs, or a rack of lamb like that. definitely would have wine. He loved wine. And it probably back then wasn't as good as it is now, but it would definitely be, a red wine. All the fixins as far as, vegetables and potatoes. But then for dessert, I would have to try to replicate Mozart's favorite candy, which were chocolate covered hazelnuts.
Oh, very interesting. So now you said something there just a moment ago that piqued my curiosity, because you said the wine probably wasn't as good then as it is now. And what makes you say that?
Well, I mean, it was probably decent back in the, 18th, 17th, 18th centuries. However, when wine first came about thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, it was used more for medicinal purposes and did not taste good.
Okay.
It basically was just to kill whatever was inside of you that was making you
Giving
sick.
you trouble. Okay. Interesting. I did not know that.
But for sure, the process of winemaking has definitely developed over the last few centuries,
Oh, you would know, you are the expert on the subject. And now let me ask you this other question. This is going back to your, I guess, maybe with your education and so forth. Was there any single person that you would say was most influential in your development with regard to your interest in food and wine?
My oldest sister is probably the one person in real life, because I've been influenced by a movie, Bottle Shock, which we can circle back to in a minute as far as becoming a sommelier. But my oldest sister was probably the most influential in where I am now. Because like I said, with my father passing away early, when somebody would say, hey, you should start a catering business because you love to throw parties and you cook well. Okay, so I started a catering business. There was an incident when I was bringing my dog down to my sister-in-law, or my sister and brother-in-law's house in Crown Point, Indiana, because my husband and I were going away for the weekend and they were going to launch the dog. And it was very, very bad weather on 65, and I hit an ice patch. The car went all the way across to the other side of the highway, and I found myself facing oncoming traffic. How we got out of that unscathed, maybe my dad was there watching me, but by the time I got to her house, I was so shaken up by what had happened, and she says to me, oh, I want you to try this Merlot and tell me what you think. And I was like, I've got the long drive back. I'm not having a glass, but I'll try a sip. And I said, fine. Notes of cocoa, dark berries, plum, a little pepper spice on the finish, a white pepper versus a black pepper. And she said, you should be a sommelier. And I said, okay.
And the rest is history. That's funny. You are someone who sees an opportunity and just sees it, and that's really a great.
Just very interesting stories on how I came to be where I am.
Yeah, I'll say. I'm very, very pleased that you're here with us today. So having said that, what advice would you give to someone who's just getting started or has an interest in this type of career path?
I would definitely say, follow your heart, follow your passion, even if it's just the first level of certification, just to get a general knowledge of the wines of the world and viniculture and viticulture. And then if you do continue, smell everything. Smell absolutely everything. During my training, I literally warned the staff members at Mariano's and Jewel that I would be in here every day walking around with an empty cart. I will be smelling boxes. I will be smelling cans. I will be smelling all of the fruit. I might pick up a rock and lick it for minerality experience, but this is what I'm doing. I'm training. It's extremely important to train your nose to pick up every kind of smell that you possibly can because of all the reds and the whites and the rosés and the ports and all the wines of the world. They all have their own personalities like we do. They all have distinct characteristics. Some of them are common, you know, like in Cabernet, it's common to have baking spices and green bell pepper characteristics and dark red berries. But then there's so much more to it. You know, there's so many more smells. And the only way to pick up those smells is to train your nose to just smell everything and try to make a connection.
I would have not anticipated that answer. That's really interesting to me because they say the memory and the sense of smell are very connected.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were going through this process, did you, I mean, what you just got done telling me, it really sparked some interest because this process sounds like it would require not only smelling, but sitting down and thinking about what it was you just experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Is that,
yeah,
would you say that's the case?
And I feel like wines that I have had that evoke a memory, like a childhood memory or a place, are those wines that I love the most because it sparks something inside of you. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's also important to be a decent cook because if you are a decent cook, and many sommeliers are good cooks, it's important because you are, you know, you're adding spices to the food and you're getting it to where you want it to be. And so here is that experience with the smell and the taste, just like it is with wine. If you don't know how to cook, that means you're not cooking, so you might not know what coriander smells like. You might not know what nutmeg smells like if you're not interested in working with food.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. That is very interesting. So, let's see. Okay, do you have any, you've already told us the funny and interesting stories, but do you have any other specific funny, interesting
I'm
stories?
sure I could think of some on the way home.
Okay,
Be like,
all right.
great,
Well, that's fair enough.
throw this in.
Yeah, we can always edit, or maybe this be one in a series of interviews regarding wine, and maybe
I would love that because there's so much to talk about.
there is a lot. There's a lot, and this is like an introduction. So let me ask you one more, and I didn't write this one down, but it just occurred to me. Are there any trends that you see in wine that you are either excited about or find maybe off-putting? Can you think of anything?
Not necessarily off-putting, not necessarily excited about, however, interested in. I would say in the last 10 to 15 years, it has become very popular to use bourbon barrels, rum barrels, and tequila barrels to do wine.
Okay.
And it's very interesting. I honestly have tried one that was like in a tequila barrel. I did not like it. I felt like it made the wine very bitter. But bourbon barrel aged wines have become very, very popular, and it adds toasted caramel, vanilla, marshmallowy characteristics to a red.
Does it sweeten the wine at all, you think, or?
Almost, but not like sweet. It just gives it like a little softness.
Okay.
And it's going to be reds, not whites.
Right.
This trend has become very popular.
Well, that's interesting.
Also, American blends. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, France has always been known for blends, Bordeaux blends, which consist of Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, Merlot, and Malbec. That's usually the traditional Bordeaux blend. And I feel like it's become popular in America over the last couple of decades.
Okay.
You know, whereas France has always done it.
Well, we're stepping up our game.
I
here,
know,
right?
we're trying.
Well, if there's nothing else you'd like to add, I think this went very well for an initial little interview here. Maybe like we mentioned just a moment ago, maybe we could follow this up with another interview in the near future.
Yep.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we?
Cheers.
Cheers. Okay, that's perfect. I'm Roman. This is the Outward Expression. Choose the good.